Welcome into the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Pod. Nick Whalen, Alex Barutha. We're back, baby. It is Monday, March 18th. We are in the stretch run, Alex. A lot of leagues starting the playoffs, beginning tonight, at least the Yahoo League that I'm in. That's how it works. Some playoffs have been underway already. Of course, some leagues going through game 82, but we are officially in the crunch time period for fantasy basketball. So we will talk all about that. We'll take your live questions. We'll talk about the injuries from the weekend, the injuries to keep an eye on this week. We got a unique schedule with a couple of teams playing 2 games. We'll talk about some streaming candidates throughout the show and do a little look back at the notables from what was a pretty fun weekend, Alex, in the NBA. And we continue to see, I think, a pretty tangible shift in the style of play, especially when you compare it to how a lot of games were transpiring back in December and January.
Yeah, the NBA, there was a clear sort of directive by the league to call fewer fouls, especially those initiated by the offensive player. I think maybe somebody, basically what happens is some reporter gets tipped off to it, and then they report on it, and then everybody else notices it, and that cycle continues. At first, the NBA denies it, and then they're like, we may have actually told our ref something. But we've seen, games be a lot more physical, a lot more competitive, lower scoring. And I think, 2 games, I would say 3 games that I watched that really sort of, I really noticed the shift it was actually earlier last week. There was Indiana versus OKC. And then on Saturday, we had Knicks Kings, which was more like a heavyweight prize fight than it was a basketball game, but it was awesome. And then Mavericks Nuggets, in addition to Kyrie's insane lefty running hook game winner, was also extremely physical, and was just a ton of fun, man. I've been really enjoying it.
Yeah, I'm not going to dive in on like the analytics. I know scoring is down about 4 points per team over the last month, which is pretty significant. Especially with the way things were heading, where it felt like, we do the NBA show on NBA radio every night, and it's like, all right, totals at 247.5. Like that just became routine, and now you look on the board and Vegas has obviously responded as you would expect. Like we're not seeing those type of totals night in and night out. And, I think you can still find examples in every given day, right? Like yesterday, the Bucks got to 140 against the Phoenix Suns. They had 70 plus in the first half, partially because Bobby Portis played the half of his life. But we are seeing, it certainly feels anecdotally, and the numbers would back this up, that a lot more of those games played in the 105 to 98 type of range, which I feel like that's exactly what the NBA wants, right? I don't think they have a target score in mind, but it almost feels to me like the All-Star game, which should not have anything to do with this, but it felt like that was the final straw. And it was like, all right, we've let this go long enough. We need to do something. And I know there is still a lot of confusion as far as what exactly has happened. Woj had a report, I think it was on Friday, that a memo had been sent out. The NBA basically denied it, but the results are there. The results are pretty clear. And, we're still seeing plenty of games in the 120s. Like it's not like that's going to be completely eradicated, but we're seeing fewer consistent games reaching 120, right? Like the Hawks for a while, it felt like we're just guaranteed to score 130 every night, which I will say, speaking as a fan, as somebody who watches a ton of basketball, who, wants to see as many teams as I can, I don't think the ideal scenario is every team scoring in the 90s or every team scoring in the 130s. You want a little bit of both, right? Like you want it to feel, you almost want it to feel more like college football, I guess. And one of the reasons I love college football is you get such a diversity of styles, right? You have some teams that are trying to score 70 every game, and they might allow 70. You have other teams that are trying to win every game 13 to 11. I think that contrast in style is something that's maybe been missing a little bit from the modern NBA over the last decade or so.
Yeah, even today I'm looking at the slate, no games over 225 over under. Very bizarre. That would have been insane in December. Another thing, you mentioned like it's kind of unclear exactly what the directive is. Like what exactly are they not calling versus what are they calling? Right. To me, it just feels like if you aren't stop calling the offensive initiated where the guy just slams into the defender. Yep. First of all, stop calling that. And then second of all, if you aren't 100% sure about the call, just don't call it. Don't call anything. Like, just instead of calling something on a 50-50, just don't call anything. Let them play. And the point that you bring up about, not necessarily wanting to see like games in the 130s for when teams score that much are fun, but when there is so much physicality, and the game it gets so ground down to, again, really physical basketball. Those moments where guys make these super athletic, smooth moves and they get wide open, they look so much better. It's unbelievable. Like, watching Dallas, Denver, it's, again, super physical. But then when Kyrie does something, he bumps into somebody really hard. There's no call. He 360 spins. He goes between the legs. He pump fakes. He gets contact. He fades away. It's like it's more unbelievable than it was when you were watching these games where everything was ticky tack. It felt like guys got into a rhythm, and it just felt like it was too easy. And you're like, I'm not surprised when someone scored 40 points. It's just, of course they did. But now when someone scores 40 and you watch the game, you're like, oh my God, this is incredible.
You said exactly what I wanted you to say, which is that it looked too easy. And it's a testament more to the skill, I think, of modern offensive players than anything else. Like every player will tell you, and you see this on podcasts and whatnot, even a couple months ago when this was in the news, you would see players say like, look, we're trying on defense, man. Like it's not like we're just going out there and not doing anything. It's like, you just can't. So I think, what the NBA is perhaps subtly trying to do is give those defenders a little bit of an advantage back. And, 20 years ago, the advantage was way too far in favor of the defense. And I think 2 months ago, it swung too far in the direction of the offense. And I think there is a balance to be struck there, because offensive players are better now than they were in 2003 when, you're getting hand checked by Tayshaun Prince every time you're handling the ball. And I think you have to find a way for defense to compensate, because that skill level is not going to diminish. There's not like we're just going to go into a dearth of basketball skill in the next 20 years. Like if anything, it's probably going to continue ascending. So when you have not only more skilled players, but you have more players on the court who are skilled, I think that's part of it too. Is like, even think back to like, I don't know what, 10, 12 years ago, the NBA finals, it's like every team had like a Kendrick Perkins at center. It's like you needed that guy that you didn't really have to worry about. Like almost no team is doing that now, right? I think not only are players more skilled, but everybody on the court has to be accounted for. And of course, that means more spacing, more guys you have to respect, more open lanes. So I don't want to go too deep on this, because it is still a little bit conceptual, and I'll be interested to see, does it sustain through the end of the regular season and into the playoffs. But I will say I am okay with the NBA stepping in on the fly. I don't think this is something where you have to wait until midseason, because it really had gotten to the point where I think the product was diminished.
Yeah, I don't mind them stepping in and doing it right now, especially as we lead into the playoffs. I think it's good for the players to get used to that physicality now before the playoffs, rather than all of a sudden the playoffs start and everybody's playing physical and nobody can make a shot because they're not used to the contact. It's also interesting that they made this decision before March Madness, because I do feel like there's a strong portion of people who watch college basketball that don't watch the NBA because they're like, these guys, it's all ticky tack. They get touched and there's no foul, and it's just the prima donnas and stuff. And now they make this change, and you cannot say that anymore. You watch these NBA games, and it's just like a car crash out there.
Well, I'll let you in on a secret there. I think most of those people are not watching the game, so they probably have no idea.
I can sure they haven't noticed. They don't even know.
Yeah, those people have not watched games in years, so I don't think that they're going to notice, a trend like this over the last month. But interesting nonetheless. All right, we'll get into some more weekend recap stuff in a bit, but we'll take some questions here. Paul, possibly the earliest question we've ever received in the history of this pod. We go live at 2:30 Central. This came in at 10:20 a.m. So thank you for that, Paul. He says, I have a bye week, and I want to stream Trey Mann for next week when he has 4 games. The bottom 5 guys I have are Jalen Suggs, Kelly Olynyk, Alex Caruso, Amen Thompson, Lopez, and maybe Middleton, ? Should I drop any of those players to pick up Trey Mann? So we're looking at next week, Alex. So that would be the week that starts Monday, March 25th.
Yeah, do not drop Middleton, please. Especially after he just came back. Also in the chat, Christopher Scott says, what has Suggs done for you lately? Good question, actually. I think Suggs is probably the drop in theory here. And look, Suggs has his good games. He gets a steal pretty much every single game. He has some nice assist games. He has some nice scoring. It is what it is. But he's worse than Alex Caruso. And Mann is going to get you more assists. I don't know how many more steals you need necessarily. So I'd be completely fine with dropping Suggs for Trey Mann.
Well, the other thing with Suggs is he has 3 games, and Caruso has 4. And Thompson has 4. The Bucks do play 3, but I'm with you. I think I hold Middleton. Hopefully you have a little bit of time to kind of see how this develops. If there's anything coming out of yesterday's game with him returning, but importantly, despite Milwaukee playing 3 games that week, we're talking next week, none of them are back-to-backs. So in theory, Chris Middleton should be out there for all 3 of those games. If that makes you nervous, if you worry about a minutes limit, I get that. So I think including him in this discussion is reasonable, but they got a couple of good matchups against the Lakers and the Hawks. They also play at New Orleans next week. So those should be pretty decent spots for Middleton. But yeah, I think if you're playing the games played argument, it's like even if Suggs had 4 games, I think there'd be a case here, right? Like it really depends how much you need steals, because that's the one category with him that's been consistent. He's been hitting some threes lately. But again, I would rather have, I think, 4 games of Tre Mann than 3 of Jalen Suggs.
Yeah, but it's also not like Tre Mann hasn't been stealing the ball. He's 2 steals a game since the All-Star break. And he's given you, the averages are 4 assists, but he had 1 0-assist game in there. And yeah, so it's that. I think we said our thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that's the move. Go with Tre Mann. Pick him up. Get the 4 games. I want to see who Charlotte plays just for reference. They're at Cleveland, home for Cleveland, home for Golden State, home for the Clippers. So not fantastic, but 4 games is 4 games at this point in the season. Christopher says weekly lock league points, considering the Triple J pattern of only playing against good teams. Any chance he plays against the Spurs because of the Wemby factor? It's the playoffs. Really need 3 games from him. So basically a do we trust Jaren Jackson question, if I'm understanding this correctly, Alex. And Memphis this week does have 3 games. The majority of the league has 3 games. We should point out both Charlotte and Dallas only have 2 games. So good week to have Tre Mann if you have a bye week, as Paul did. Otherwise, pretty brutal if you're holding Luka, Kyrie, guys like that. But Jaren Jackson, 3 games for the Grizzlies. Is there any possible way to predict when Jaren Jackson is going to play?
I don't really think so. The pattern has kind of been that he's played against good teams, sat against bad teams. Although maybe we buried the lead a little bit. Not to answer your question, but Desmond Bane came back. He actually came back. It's very shocking to me. And he played 32 minutes in his first game back. Is that recommended? Who thinks that's a good idea? I don't know. He goes for 22 and 7. Pretty nice game all around. So I don't know if Bane coming back affects now what they're going to do with Jaren Jackson. I still don't think Triple J is especially trustworthy. I think I would just lean on starting Jackson. If you only get 2 games out of him, it's still going to be a pretty productive 2 games you're going to get out of him. And the chance of getting a 3rd game, to me, it's hard to turn that down.
Yeah, it's tough because they play tonight in the late window, right? So you'll at least know if he's out there tonight or not. And as of right now, he's not on the injury report. So the expectation should be that he plays. And like, if that's the case, it's like, all right, we're at least locked in 1 game and then he's in your lineup and that's that. If he ends up being ruled out tonight and you have to make some sort of late swap, I would just be ready to do that. In which case, then you're only looking at a max of 2 games. So I think you have to live with that. Looking at their schedule, they don't play any back-to-backs. So they play Monday, Wednesday, Friday. He sat out back-to-backs of late, but he sat out both halves of them. So it's not really clear if it's, that much of a workload thing or just kind of how the schedule breaks down. And, they get Sacramento, Golden State, and the San Antonio Spurs. It's tough to really find a pattern for me, Alex. I guess he has played more against the reasonably good teams lately, but I don't know. Like, he also sat out against Milwaukee before the All-Star break. Like, are we really saying that like Atlanta and Philly are good teams relative to, Brooklyn and Charlotte? Like, I guess I don't know if that's like what would be the thinking behind that if you're the Grizzlies? Do you think that's actually what they're doing, or is it just coincidental?
I mean, it could be. It's hard to say. I mean, if you were trying to play your guys in games that you're probably going to lose anyway, like, it's not going to make a difference if Triple J plays, then I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I would just start him, to be honest with you. If I had him on my team, I would just start him and hope to get 3 games.
Okay. Christopher followed up and said he could also go with 4 games from Aaron Nesmith or Delano Banton. So are those more appealing to you? The Banton thing is so tough for me because there's so much up in the air for Portland. I was going through and doing some projection stuff last night, and it's like, well, they're claiming that Jeremy Grant's going to play. He's now doubtful for tonight, but he's been in and out lately. They're claiming Brogdon's coming back at some point. Like with Banton, you're getting the upside of like 40 plus minutes if things remain stable. But at any point, it feels like this rotation could shift pretty dramatically.
I mean, yeah, I mean, if you're asking who is the best fantasy player right now out of, Nesmith and Banton, it's actually Banton.
Yeah.
But whose minutes do I trust the least? Banton. Who do I trust Who do I trust to play the fewest games? Jaren Jackson. Yes. Who do I trust to be the worst fantasy player out of all these guys? Aaron Nesmith. So it's like, I feel like you're in like a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation with these three guys.
I think you explained it perfectly. I think Nesmith is the safest. I think Banton, I wouldn't say he has the highest upside because I think Triple J, even in 3 games, still has the higher upside.
More so than Nesmith, I'm saying.
Yeah. But even Banton, it's like Banton's playing well. He's playing a ton of minutes. I still think if you get three bangers out of Jaren Jackson, that's probably better than a 3-game or a 4-game total for Banton, but it could be close. I mean, he's been scoring a ton. The defensive stats have come and gone. He went like 5 games in a row with no steals and had 4 against the Knicks. So I don't know if we can really depend on that. But I guess maybe the bigger question, and this can kind of digress from the original question, is like when it comes to Banton, how worried are we about Malcolm Brogdon? Or is this like the same situation as saying, oh, LaMelo Ball is going to come back and ruin Trey Mann?
Yeah, well, it's pretty similar to that.
Yeah.
And even if Brogdon does come back, is he going to play every game when he's back? Is he going to be playing 30 minutes? Because what are the chances they're in competitive games? Pretty low. Is Brogdon going to be out there in fourth quarters in non-competitive games? Probably not. And even if Brogdon does come back, what are they going to do with Jeremy Grant? Because Banton is big enough to play like 1 through 4 basically for Portland. Because he is 6'7", but he is a good passer. He's a really just, the Raptors had him. I think that tells you all you need to know about what kind of a player he is.
All right, we'll move on from Delano Banton, who could be like an all-time remember that guy in the final weeks of fantasy, the way he's playing. Matt, loyal listener, loyal viewer, always appreciate the questions from him. He says, I'm in my finals and I have to take 2 players off of IL. I can only keep one of the following 3. Trey Jones, Jeremy Sochan, Nick Richards. This is head-to-head points with a double-double bonus league.
Interesting. Trey Jones, I mean, he is at this point, I mean, for most of his career, he's basically an assist specialist. And Sochan, he's kind of up and down, is giving you just an assortment of stats, like the sort of, I don't know, you give it like 14, 7, and 3 kind of stuff, which is solid. But and then because none of these guys, I guess Richards is in theory the guy who's going to probably give you the most consistent double-doubles, but he's not giving you much else, right? And he's not even really giving you blocks.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's do you have a strong opinion on any of these guys?
Well, first of all, if like this coming week is your fantasy final, it's a 2-game week for Charlotte, right? So I think, does that just eliminate Nick Richards? The Spurs have 3 games. It could still be close. Maybe it depends how like crazy this double-double bonus is, because he's the most likely of those 3 to get you that. But that's probably not enough to push it over. I mean, Charlotte plays tomorrow against Orlando, Saturday against Atlanta. Spurs this week play Dallas, Memphis, Phoenix. I think you got to take the 3 games in this scenario. And it depends a little bit more on your category needs, like how much. It's head-to-head points league overall, so we're not really worried about that, I suppose. I would just go Trey Jones. You know where I stand on Sochan. Maybe higher night-to-night upside, but also a much lower floor to me. So I would slightly lean Jones, then Sochan, then Richards based on the schedule.
The schedule point's very good. Yeah, if it's just for this week, then that's what you got to do. Yeah, between Sochan and Trey Jones, you got to just go with whatever guy fits the head-to-head strategy that you're using.
Yeah.
Or if you're punting rebounds, just keep Jones. If you're punting assists, keep Sochan.
All right. Christian Rogers says, good afternoon, fellas. DeJounte Murray's stat correction on Yahoo caused me to lose the rebound category and get knocked out of the playoffs. Oh my goodness. Lost his matchup 6-5. The score had changed 3 times last night. All caps, pain. Christian, I feel you, man. I feel you. I've had some stat corrections this year, mostly on like Prize Picks. Not their fault. They use a third party stats provider where you think you're good, and then all of a sudden it says you got Jalen Duren 13 rebounds. You check again 10 minutes later, he's magically down to 12. I would like there to be a more exact science here, or just like, I'm okay with these not necessarily updating exactly live. Like don't update it until we know for sure what's going to be official here.
That would be awesome if they just prevented you from even checking until like the next day. And so they just keep you on it.
I like being able to check it live, but to me, is it worth like, this fear, especially in this situation, right? Where it's like your whole fantasy life comes down to one rebound that they decide to take away.
Yeah, that's really annoying. That's nothing you can do about that, unfortunately.
Yeah. All right. A couple notes here from Johnny. He says, what's up, fellas? Thank you for all the info y'all gave me. You helped me stay in first place. All right, Johnny, appreciate you dropping by each week. He says, I have a bye week and I picked up TJ, Bagley, and Duncan. Who else should I drop, lively, or hold? Okay, interesting phrasing here. I assume you picked up TJ McConnell, Marvin Bagley, and Duncan Robinson. Can't necessarily tell you who to drop on your roster. But if you're wondering if you should drop Derek Lively, that's a fair question. I mean, first of all, when it comes to Bagley, Alex, I believe he was still out yesterday. We have really no idea when he's going to be back. He's missed like 8 games in a row now. Washington plays tomorrow against Houston, Thursday, Saturday. So, I mean, just not knowing Bagley's status and knowing where the Wizards are right now, it's like, would you rather just hold Lively?
I'm fine with holding Lively. Sorry, I was just looking at Wizards sat basically everybody yesterday, and I just sorted by minutes from the game. 36 for Justin Champagny, 32 for Patrick Baldwin, 25 for Anthony Gill. A man named Jules Bernard played 24 minutes.
Never heard of him.
22 minutes for Johnny Davis. This is incredible.
I think their entire starting lineup was basically out yesterday, right?
Yeah. Jules Bernard. I agree with what Nick said. Bagley, who even knows, man? He may never come back. I don't know what to tell you. Like, these teams that are so bad and they're operating like this, who knows? And it's a back injury. So it's like, it's really easy for them to be like, we'll hold you out, because back injuries are serious. And it's really uncomfortable to play with a back injury, obviously. So I'm actually fine just keeping Derek Lively for the points. It'd be hard to drop Bagley, but I don't know.
This Jules Bernard guy has appeared in 11 games this year.
I don't believe
11 games. This is the first time that he's seen real minutes, but he's apparently he played in the game in December. Never heard of him.
He was the 45th recruit in the 2018 class.
Sure. Okay.
4 seasons at UCLA.
Take your word for it.
Every once in a while. I mean, look, we're in the weeds as much in like draft and like G League and Summer League. The fact that someone can just slip by and I've never heard of them, I almost feel like embarrassed. I'm like, I don't know who Jules Bernard is.
Yeah, I know. And like I watch more college basketball than you. I should know who this person is. The one that really hit me this year, and this one kind of went semi-viral, was the Onuralp Bitim guy.
Oh yeah,
for the Bulls, who's now like playing real minutes every night. So it's like, we know who he is now. But he had that game, I think it was against the Cavs like 3 weeks ago, where it was one of the Bulls like crazy come from behind wins that they've had like 10 of this year, and he played 28 minutes. And I was like, who in the heck? Like, the photo almost looks like AI generated. Like that. It's such a like, you're 25 years into your 2K dynasty type of name. Like, the whole thing just felt a little fishy.
Yeah, it's very bizarre. I had noticed his name at some point, so I'd been on the Bitim train, I think, before some other people.
Yeah,
but I was very much caught off guard by the whole saga, I guess.
He's playing 17 minutes a game over the last 3 weeks here. So, if you're in a deeper league, if you're in a league where you have to roster a Turkish rookie, BT might be the dude. Kenny says playoffs next week, 9-cat, 10-team head-to-head. Who's better to hold for the rest of the season. Olynyk versus Hartenstein. Dosunmu versus Herb Jones versus Amen Thompson. Okay, so we'll start with the first one. Olynyk versus Hartenstein.
Man. So I would lean Olynyk. I think Olynyk is the better fantasy player right now. He still worries me in terms of like, is Toronto really gonna have Kelly Olynyk, who is 32 years old, playing 28 minutes a game for the rest of the season?
Got married in a snapback hat.
Yes. And your playoffs start next week. That's late, unfortunately. I wish your playoffs did not start then. That gives me anxiety. I wish they started earlier. But I would go Olynyk for the first one. Do you have any thoughts about the last, like that trio?
Well, first of all, I'm looking at the schedule. So next week, the Knicks play 4 times, the Raptors play 3 times. Beyond that, the Knicks play 4 times and the Raptors play 4 times a week after. So not over the course of 2 weeks, assuming you're alive for both, we're talking about a 1-game difference. I would lean Olynyk, partially because of all the things you said, which were correct, and partially because is it totally out of the question that Randall and or Robinson could come back in the next 2 weeks? Like, I think it's possible.
Well, I mean, the Knicks were denied a disabled player exception
Right.
for Mitchell Robinson because the NBA came in and were like, you were lying. Mitchell Robinson could come back. He's fine. So yeah, that is I would say a mild concern.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's out there, and I think it's totally possible that one of the one of those guys could be back. So the other one is Dosunmu versus Herb Jones versus Amen Thompson. Yeah, I mean, right away, my first inclination would be Dosunmu, just because the minutes continue to be so crazy. Although it sounds like Kobe White might be able to return tonight. Even with that, he's still played high 30s, low 40s most nights. Got to still live with the floor games, where he'll just play 40 minutes and somehow have 7 points and 3 assists. But given you the counting stats, the percentages have been pretty good. Herb Jones has definitely had an emergence over these last couple of weeks. Like, he went through a pretty quiet stretch. The offense has kind of lagged a little bit, but the defensive stats are back with Herb Jones. And then we got Amen Thompson hanging out in Houston, trying to, sap some of the Şengün minutes. He started 3 in a row now. He's going to give you rebounds. He's going to give you defensive stats. I mean, he's like 17 of 22 from the floor over the last 2 games.
Yeah, it's an interesting lineup change for Houston. I do like starting a Mann because you surrounded him with shooters and he can kind of just do his thing on both ends of the court. But yeah, of these 3 guys, who would I start? I would start Dosunmu. I think he is. Let's see, he hasn't been consistent game to game lately, but he's having more swings in terms of big game, small game, big game, small game. But I just think from a role perspective, his is the safest. He's done basically for months now. This, so this is stat specific stuff aside. If you're punting certain categories, whatever, just blind, I would just start Dosunmu here.
Yeah, I mean, if you have all these guys on your roster as opposed to like dropping or picking them up, like I think you can go week to week here. Like I would go Dosunmu for the week ahead, but the week after, I think 27 teams have 4 games, and the Bulls are one of only 3 teams that have 3 games. So at that point, then you go back to Herb Jones or Amen Thompson. So hopefully you have some options at your disposal. But that's the way I would lean. Good question from Christian. He says, "What has happened to Jonas Valanciunas? He's one of the main reasons I lost my rebound category in the playoffs." I was thinking about this last night, Alex, when I was doing some work for the site. Didn't this happen last year too? Or was it 2 years ago where it's like he was having this great year and then for whatever reason, they just went for like a month of like, yeah, we're just going to play you 18 minutes a night?
Yep. He is down to, 19 minutes a game over his past 10. They have been running a lot of Larry Nance out there, to be honest, at center. A lot more dynamic player. Better passer. He's more mobile. He can catch lobs. He can shoot threes. And I just think with how much they're featuring Zion now, I don't think this has always been the kind of confusing part about the Valanciunas fit is like the last thing you want in a lineup with Zion is this like plotting, lane clogging big who is not that athletic or is not doing that much other stuff out there. So I think they're just settling into a lineup that they like. And what's happened to him. I just think my guess is if you told me, over under 24 minutes a game for the rest of the season, I'm taking under.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, the Pelicans non-coincidentally are in arguably the best stretch of their season right here, right? So I don't think they're going to change this up until they really need to. They're also healthier than they've been for much of the year, when it felt like, one of like Herb Jones or Trey Murphy or Zion was always banged up. And I think they have so many guys that it's hard for Valanciunas to consistently be this 26, 28-minute guy every night. And it's working, right? I mean, they're having success going smaller, being a little bit more versatile, putting Zion on the ball a bit more. There's a report this morning, by the way, that Zion's down 25 pounds since the in-season tournament. That seems like a lot. I'm willing to say he definitely looks more trim, more athletic. 25 pounds, I think that'd be more noticeable. I'm just saying.
I mean, Zion is a guy, he plays himself into shape. Yeah. I think the reason that he has been so big is because he hasn't been playing. And now that he's playing, I think he's just down 25 pounds. I think it's possible. But yeah, I mean, it's like we've been saying, and just in terms of like a lot of these times you're going up against teams who, especially their backup five, is not really a five sometimes, and is not going to punish you physically. So you can be out there without a center for like 6-7 minutes a game easily. And you're like, well, I can put Zion out there with Ingram, with Trey Murphy, with Herb Jones. Let's just do that. So unfortunately, I think this is where it's going to be for Valanciunas.
All right. Van Dam says, would you prefer Hartenstein or Conley for tonight only? 10-team points league. So it looks like we got daily lineups here. FYI, thanks for the advice on Gary Trent as well. I don't know if I can take credit for that. Was that
you? Historically, I have been a Gary Trent guy, so I'm going to assume that what I said, that it was something I said. Let's say that.
Okay, well, he said the advice was to pick him up last week. Oh. So that must have been you guys on Friday, right?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Yeah. I mean, I've been burned too many times by that, man. I don't think I said anything, remotely confident about him.
Gary Trent will absolutely burn you in a normal regular season setting. But in this setting for the Toronto Raptors, where they're playing like 7 guys and 4 of those guys are was part of their normal rotation, Gary Trent will take shots. Conley or Hartenstein for tonight? Well, the Knicks are in Golden State and Minnesota is in Utah. The Utah matchup, obviously much easier. I would worry a little bit if I was New York, if I started Hartenstein, that the Warriors would run small and then maybe Tibbs there'd be some more Achua out there, maybe. Hard to say. But Utah's a really soft opponent, and Conley used to play there, so he could be comfortable.
So you're right about Hartenstein. He played 20 minutes. They luckily played the Warriors a few weeks ago. He played 20 minutes, 6 points, 6 rebounds, 1 steal, 2 of 5 from the field. So it's not a great matchup for somebody like him, especially because, like you said, they have Achua. They're not really afraid to throw Jericho Sims into the mix as well. There is no OG Anunoby tonight for the Knicks. I'm not sure if that really matters for Hartenstein. Probably not, but something to keep an eye on. And then with Minnesota, Gobert's questionable, Kyle Anderson's questionable, and Monte Morris, the backup point guard, is also questionable. I think of those 3, the Kyle Anderson one is maybe what impacts Conley the most, as far as Anderson spending time on the ball, doing a little bit more distributing. I mean, you're picking between, in my opinion, 2 fairly underwhelming options. Conley's played really well the last 2 games. Those were like his 2 best offensive games of the entire year. So you do wonder if that could continue. He's 10 for 18 from 3 in the last 2 games. I do think I would still lean that way, though, because this is a really good matchup against Utah. And if you have to make that decision right now, if Kyle Anderson's out, I think that gives him a pretty decent boost as well.
I agree with everything you said. At the same time, I'm always, he's going up against Chris Dunn in theory. Although maybe they'll put Dunn on Anthony Edwards. They might put him on Anthony Edwards. I take that back. I think Conley's fine. Like Nick said, if Kyle Anderson's out, even if Gobert's out, there's going to be some usage opening up.
All right, we got a question here from Paul. If I'm summarizing this correctly, I believe the question is essentially, should I drop Ausar Thompson and plan on keeping Simone Fontecchio over the longer term here as we play it out in Detroit? fair question. Ausar is going to miss his 5th straight game now due to an illness, which is a little weird.
It's an asthma thing.
Right. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
I don't know really a whole lot about asthma, but like I thought it was just like a 1-game thing. Like he just couldn't play in 1 game, but was there like an asthma attack?
It could have been. It seems like all we have really is that was an asthma flare up. So I wish I don't know.
Okay.
Bizarre.
Okay. So, well, either way, appreciate the clarity there. They have a 4-game week. He's not going to play tonight. That leaves a maximum of 3 games. Fontecchio dealing with a toe injury. That this time of year, those toe injuries can get you. He is questionable for tonight. I would be more confident that he either plays through that or misses less time than Ausar. I mean, Fontecchio started 4 in a row. He's played 34 plus minutes in all 4. Completely different player from Ausar Thompson in terms of the stat profile, but I think given what we know right now, I think I would go Fontecchio.
I'm fine with Fontecchio. Yeah, I will. I mean, the thing I will say is you have to always make this clarification all the time. What kind of league are you in? Are you in a roto league? Are you in a head-to-head league where it's like if you need the blocks and steals and rebounds or assists, you go Ausar. If you need the points and threes, you go Fontecchio. So there's some, you got to weigh that a little bit. But yeah, just sort of blind. I don't really know when Ausar is coming back. And Fontecchio, past 30 days per game, has been better than Ausar. So I'm fine with that.
Good question from Patrick. He says, is Herro a drop? Might have to be, man. Might have to be out at least another week. If yours is one of those leagues where it's like this is the semifinals and next week is the finals, like I think so, right? I mean, even if he comes back, what are you getting? Like a maximum of 2 games where he's limited?
Yeah, depends on when your playoffs is.
Yeah,
I would prefer not to have to couch it like that, but it 100% depends on when your playoffs is. I think if you have to win within the next 2 weeks your matchup, then probably you have to drop him because it's reevaluated in 1 to 2 weeks, which dealing with what we have dealt with injury wise in terms of Nick and I like covering this for a long time, I'm always going to lean on the longer end of that timetable when they say reevaluated. So I'm just gonna assume he's out for 2 weeks.
I think you have to. If it's a league that goes through game 82 and you can just keep him chilling in an IR spot, I'm okay with that. And if you're in a deeper league, it also comes down to like, all right, who are you grabbing? It's like, are you dropping Tyler Herro so you could go pick up, I don't know, Markelle Fultz? At that point, it's like, is it even worth it? Are you getting enough out of it to justify the potential downside of Tyler Herro coming back sooner than we expect and somebody else in your league picking him up? Like, I think if I'm in like a 10 or 12 team league and I could get somebody out there who's a real difference maker, if I could add, I don't know, Trey Mann or somebody like that, like, then you have to do it. But if you're talking about working the margins and just adding somebody just to add someone who you might not even be putting in your starting lineup, I would say it's worth hanging on to Herro. I think Desmond Bane would be kind of the cautionary tale version of this.
Yeah, and Bane. A lot of these, do I drop this guy questions when there are situations like this? Some of it does depend on league size. Like you just said, if you're in a 10-team league and you have Tyler Herro, way less risk in dropping him and just streaming other guys in because 10-team leagues have a ton of great streamable guys on the wire all the time. I've always said the same thing for Bane. But if you're in a 16-team league and you had Bane or you have Herro now, it's a lot harder to make that decision because realistically, who are you picking up? Yeah.
All right. Daniel says, please rank the following players for the rest of the week. 9-cat daily lineup league. Peyton Pritchard, the unicorn. Is that Porzingis?
I'm going to assume, yeah.
Okay. Nwora and Jontay Porter.
I think
that's got to be Kornet, right?
Actually, I don't know. Yeah, I'm about to check Basketball Reference. The green Kornet is on there. Look, man, Kornet. Okay, I didn't know that. Thank you.
It is in fact Kornet. I was gonna say it's like, all right, like Porzingis is gonna be number 1.
Let's start with Porzingis.
Peyton Pritchard, Jordan Nwora, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jontay Porter.
Look, I mean, Nwora launches shots, man.
He does.
He flings. Like, he's been playing 18 minutes a game over the past 5 games, 12 points a game. Jontay Porter is giving you sometimes 0 points, but the steals and blocks are pretty good. Plays absolutely nothing like his brother Michael Porter. I mean, you could not be farther from playing like someone you're related to than Jontay Porter and Michael Porter.
I think Jontay Porter's torn his ACL at least twice, so he's a little bit limited. Not that he was ever the prospect. He was never like the type of prospect that MPJ was, but yeah, I mean, he was one of those guys that just had like an ultra tragic college career, which, by the way, look into this. I don't have all the numbers in front of me, but like Michael Porter I think he has like 4 or 5 siblings, maybe more. And like all of them have had crazy injury issues. Like they're just like a family plagued by knee problems.
I've heard about that. Ken, Shannon, and I talked about Jontay Porter last pod. And I was like, wasn't he like day to day with a knee injury for an entire year? The answer is yes, because I wrote 18 Jontay Porter notes during his rookie year, basically just saying out Tuesday, out Wednesday, out Thursday, out Monday. Anyway, this is a deep league, man. 9Cat Daily. I feel like you're gonna. It's with the Celtics might rest guys down the stretch, right? So that's kind of what your argument is for Pritchard and Kornet, which is the Celtics lately have been listing a lot of guys as questionable going into certain games. And usually one of them sits out, 1 to 2, and then the other 2, maybe 3 will play. We know that Porzingis is pretty injury prone and sits out a lot, and Horford doesn't play back-to-backs and will also sit out a lot. So I would lean Kornet to an extent because there are going to be games where he's just going to play a lot of minutes because they have no other bigs really other than like a couple of guys at the end of their bench. As far as Nwora and Porter, that's just what you need category-wise. It just comes down to that. And to be honest, not to fence walk on this too much, these guys are all so different players that to me, it just comes down to what do you need categories wise.
Yeah. For this week specifically, I think I would lean toward the Boston guys, 4 games versus 3 games. Pritchard to me is probably the safest as far as not missing any games or having the highest like minutes floor night to night. Boston is kind of going into some like late season load management mode. If you've been paying attention over the last few games, like tonight, they will not have Drew Holiday out there. So that should be a nice boost for Peyton Pritchard. They won't have Al Horford tonight. They won't have Sam Hauser. Tatum's questionable. Brown's questionable. Porzingis is on the report. Like, I think this is going to be pretty common for the Celtics the rest of the way, and especially this week now that they basically have the 1 seed in the East locked up. So I would go Peyton. If I have to choose one of those guys, I would go Pritchard first. I guess maybe Kornet by default. I mean, again, no Al Horford tonight, and they also have a back-to-back coming up over the weekend. So Horford's missing at least 2 of those games. And Kornet, it's like Kornet's numbers are not that much different than Jontay Porter, who's played, I guess, a few more minutes here and there. But again, lately, Kornet's basically been locked into like 15 to 20 minutes. And I think I want the 4 games from Boston as opposed to the 3 from Toronto. By the way, I dug up something on the Porter injuries as a family. This is from October of 2018. So I think there's been more since then. Like Michael Porter's had at least 1 back surgery since this point. Pretty sure Jontay Porter's had another injury since 2018 as well. But at the time, Jontay Porter had torn his ACL and MCL. Michael Porter had 2 back surgeries and played in 2 games in his entire career at Missouri. His sister Sierra had multiple knee surgeries and medically retired. His sister Bree, 5 torn ACLs, medically retired.
5 torn ACLs?
5 torn ACLs.
That's like more than Jabari Parker and Derrick Rose combined.
That's crazy. 5.
So this is why, we talked about like, well, we Michael Porter slipped in the draft, MPJ, and you're like, how does he slip this far? It's, I forget who said it. Someone said they got a reporter said they talked to a team and that team said it was the worst medicals they had ever seen on any prospect ever.
MPJ, you're saying?
MPJ.
Yeah.
Because they do take into account family history when it's an athlete family. Yeah. I mean,
when you have like 12 torn ACLs between your immediate family members, yeah.
If
it's actually a miracle he's been as healthy as he has. And I mean, it's the career that Michael Porter Jr. has had is also strange because, I mean, you remember him as a prospect, right? Like, it was not, oh, this guy will be a nice, like, 3-point shooter role player.
Oh,
It was like, this guy wants to be Jason Tatum and thinks he's Jason Tatum.
yeah, this guy's going to be like Carmelo, but better.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to be like, what if Carmelo sprayed from 3 all the time?
Yeah.
What
if you mixed Carmelo Anthony with Hassan Whiteside's vision? Then what?
Man, if you have 12,
right.
it's 12 ACLs. If you have 12 ACLs in 12 generations of your family, that's a lot. But yet,
yeah, I don't even know if I like know somebody personally who's torn their ACL, and I'm sure I do. It's just nobody like none of my immediate friends have had like we play a ton of basketball, played in high school and college and whatnot. Nobody, I mean, the same person tearing their ACL 5 times. My goodness. All right, enough of that. We'll hit a few more of these and we'll be on our way out. A little bit of speculation here, but Billy says, do you think Jaylen Brown plays 4 games this week? I would say it's less likely that he does. If you set the line at like 3.5, I would take the under.
So questionable for tonight against the Pistons. Yeah. So that's already questionable. Then they play the Bucks. Then they play Detroit again, and then Chicago.
Back to back.
Look, I think back to back. I would not be surprised if he sat out. I would not even be surprised if he sat out tonight and Friday. So keep that in mind. And then also the Celtics are about to go on a really long road trip. So I don't know if that's going to play into it at all, but I would consider that. They're about to go on a 6-game road trip. So maybe they want him fresh for that.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. I mean, I don't think that we're looking at like a shutdown or anything, but they're 9.5 up in the East. They've already, he's already missed 2 of the last 3 games. Like you said, he played Detroit twice. I can't imagine he plays in both of those. So yeah, I know it's technically a 4-game week for Jaylen Brown, but I would probably treat it as a 3-game week and then, go from there. All right. Daniel says, in addition to mercy of the fantasy hoops gods, you gents offered solid streaming advice to allow me to beat a juggernaut in last week's semis. All right. There we go. Daniel, we'd love to hear it. Best of luck in the finals this week. Drello28 says, Jalen Duren against Boston tonight or Naz Reid against the Jazz in a points league. So we're kind of looking at a one-night streamer here. Not necessarily a streamer, I guess, but just, somebody to put in the lineup tonight. Naz Reid or Jalen Duren. I would say we got to wait on Gobert, right, before we fire up Naz Reid.
Yes, but also Naz Reid against the Jazz.
Yeah,
I mean that's pretty nice. I don't think Taylor Hendricks or John Collins is going to be guarding Naz Reid very well, and we've seen Reid have some big games without Gobert. Duren against Boston, that's not an easy matchup. I mean, he's a 2020 monster. But Porzingis is going to play. That might pull him out to the 3-point line. Tough team. I mean, that they could go down by 40. Would that surprise anybody? Duren's the safest option, but I actually think the upside option is Naz Reid.
Okay. All right. I don't have anything else to add there because the only other time they played Boston this season was that weird game when it was, they almost beat them when they were on the losing streak.
Yeah.
I think they went to overtime. Duren had 15 and 14, but it needed 40 minutes to get there. So, yeah, I think you're right to kind of look at the Porzingis matchup as like, I'm not saying Duren can't handle it, but it might not be like the best rebounding upside type of matchup for Duren. And I think if Gobert ends up sitting tonight, then I would go Naz Reid. That's like too good of a spot almost. Joseph says, do you believe that a stream of Lowry for his assists and steals outweighs the negatives he could bring you this week? 16-team league. All right, so we're at least in the right size league to be talking about Kyle Lowry. 9-cat head-to-head. Ooh, well, Kyle Lowry, it is what it is at this point. Still giving you some steals. He's
that is true.
Handing out some assists every now and then. Picking up some fouls. He had 4 fouls the other night against Charlotte. Schedule-wise this week for Philly, it is a 4-game week. So you have that going for you. I mean, I don't know. 16-team league, there's just not a whole lot out there. So it sounds really unappealing, but that's just kind of life on the waiver wire this time of year.
I mean, I almost always say, maybe I use this barometer too much, but if there's a guy who could get you 20 assists in a week, probably worth grabbing and starting him.
Yeah.
Same way, you get you 20 assists and 4 steals. That's a great week. Yeah, he might not be giving you anything else really anywhere. The field goal percentage sucks, but you got to weigh that a little bit. He's a fine stream, 4-game week.
All right, we got a similar question to the Jaylen Brown one. We think Derek White misses one of the upcoming back-to-backs. Any clues on the severity of Sam Hauser's ankle? Not much on Hauser. I mean, they ruled him out pretty quickly for tonight. Obviously Celtics have a pretty huge cushion here to be cautious with him. So tough to say, if that's day to day or game to game or what. Derek White not on the injury report tonight against Detroit. They play back-to-back Friday, Saturday. They don't have another back-to-back until games 80 and 81, if I'm counting correctly here. So it's really just that one back-to-back Friday, Saturday against Detroit, Chicago that you'd be worried about.
Yeah, and so, I mean, Brown is questionable tonight. Drew Holiday is sitting out. I think ideally Boston just wants at least one of Holiday or Derek White healthy.
Yeah.
So part of me thinks, okay, Holiday's out tonight. My guess is he plays another one of these upcoming games this week, maybe in the back-to-back, and then White gets one of the nights off, and they just do that.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, because so many, like all these guys have been on the injury report lately, from Horford to Porzingis to Tatum to Brown to White to Holiday. It does feel like White has played the most of these guys, despite being on the injury report. Like yesterday against Washington was his first absence in a long time, like month and a half. So I think he's the guy that's probably most likely to be consistent. Like I think he plays more games the rest of the season than Holiday does. But I think what you're implying is there's basically going to be like a rotation setup where it's like, all right, one of you guys is sitting tonight, the other one will play the next night. Tatum will take you off this night. Brown, you're in. Like I think the Celtics are, being cognizant of the NBA rest rules for one, which I don't think any of these games are going to be on national TV, especially the back-to-back Friday, Saturday, Detroit, Chicago. I will say that, I mean, this would be something that might come up for that Wednesday game against Milwaukee, right? I mean, that might be one where they can only hold out so many guys.
Yeah, which is why I think they're kind of doing this carousel thing.
Yeah.
So that they can't get dinged. And their team is good enough where if they hold out one of their starters, it's like, well, you're not really ruining the product.
Yeah. Well, it almost works out better for fantasy and like betting and stuff. For like if they're playing Detroit without Jaylen Brown or you're playing Chicago without Jason Tatum, I kind of like it. Like it reduces like the dramatic blowout factor, and obviously gives a higher floor to guys like Kornet and Peyton Pritchard. All right, we'll wrap it up there. Great questions as always, guys. Good luck to everybody who's in the fantasy playoffs, especially if you're in the finals this week. We hope that we've given you some advice over the last like 21 weeks that have helped you get to this point. Alex, it's not looking great for us in the RotoWire Stake League. The Şengün injury, final nail in the coffin for me. It's going to be another disappointing year on that front, but success in other leagues as well. But it'd be nice to not be on the hook for a like $350 steak dinner this year.
I heard the NFL one was high. Let's say there was some buzz about maybe banning alcohol from the.
Who brought that up? That's not going to happen.
I don't. Look, there's expensive wines is an easy way to rack up the bill, and it's borderline. I think to some people.
Yeah, well, I think inflation, is part of it as well.
That is true, actually.
Really gone undercovered here. Look, I got nobody to blame but myself for paying for Jaren Jackson and Lauri Markkanen, and I should have known that the Grizzlies' entire team would be injured 20 games into the year. But we'll do some more, kind of looking back on the season, looking ahead in the coming weeks once the fantasy playoffs are over. Once we don't have so many good questions to answer, we'll start looking ahead to next season, talking more playoffs, things of that nature. But we will be back next Monday. We'll have the great Dr. Ray on the pod tomorrow. I'll be with Brandon Kravitz Wednesday, Dr. Ray and Rick Thursday, Alex, Ken, and Shannon coming to you on Friday.